What if I told you that every time you share a detail of your life, you're actually giving away a piece of your soul? Not metaphorically, but in a very real, very practical sense. Stay with me now, because this understanding could change everything. There's something happening in our modern world that deeply concerns me. People have developed this peculiar habit of turning their entire existence into a kind of public broadcast. Every thought, every feeling, every plan gets immediately translated into words and scattered to whoever will listen. And what they don't realize is that they're engaging in a form of spiritual and psychological hemorrhaging that leaves them empty, confused, and strangely powerless. Walk down any street, sit in any cafe, and you'll hear people unpacking their entire lives to virtual strangers, as if the mere act of speaking somehow validates their existence. When you have an experience, a genuine living experience, it exists in you as something vital and whole. Perhaps you've had a sudden insight, a moment of clarity about your life's direction. In that moment, the insight is pure, it's yours. It has power because it's contained within you, germinating, developing roots in the soil of your consciousness. But the moment you rush out and tell everyone about it, something fundamental changes. The insight, which was a living seed, gets pulled out of the ground before it can take root. You've converted a living experience into a dead description. And descriptions, no matter how eloquent, are always corpses of experience. They're the skeleton left behind after the life has gone out of something. When you immediately verbalize your insights, your plans, your inner movements, you're essentially choosing the skeleton over the living creature. I know what some of you are thinking. We've been told that sharing is good, that communication is the answer to everything, that opening up is healthy, and there's some truth in that. But like all truths, it's been distorted in our time into something grotesque. There's a vast difference between appropriate sharing with someone who can genuinely receive it and this compulsive spilling of your inner life to anyone who happens to be nearby, anyone with ears. Think about it practically. When you tell someone about a goal you're pursuing, what happens? You receive a response. Maybe they congratulate you, maybe they express concern, maybe they share their own story, and in that moment, your brain experiences a small reward. You've gotten acknowledgement, validation, attention. The problem is, your nervous system has just given you a taste of the reward that should have come from actually achieving the goal. You've taken the energy that was meant to propel you forward and spent it on the satisfaction of being seen, being acknowledged, being understood. This isn't mystical thinking. This is basic psychology, basic human nature at work. Every time you talk about doing something, you reduce the probability that you'll actually do it. The talk becomes a substitute for the action. You become someone who lives in the realm of intentions and explanations rather than accomplishments and experiences. But there's something even more dangerous happening when you constantly share your life. You're inviting other people's consciousness into your psychological space. Every person you tell becomes, in effect, a voice in your head. They have opinions, don't they? They have fears, concerns, advice. Some of them mean well. Some of them are projecting their own limitations onto you, but all of them are now occupying mental real estate that should be reserved for your own clarity, your own inner knowing. I've watched this happen countless times. Someone has a clear intuition about a direction they need to take. They know it in their bones. But instead of acting on that knowing, they consult with 10 different people. And by the time they've finished collecting opinions, their own clarity has been completely obscured. They're drowning in a sea of other people's thoughts, fears, and projections. They came to the conversation knowing what to do. They leave it completely confused, paralyzed by contradictory advice. This is why the ancient wisdom traditions consistently emphasize the importance of silence. The Taoists spoke of the power that accumulates in stillness. The Christian mystics practiced what they called holy secrecy. The Buddhist monks understood that certain realizations must be protected from the profane noise of casual conversation. They weren't being elitist or mysterious for its own sake. They understood something profound about how consciousness actually works. When you keep something private, you allow it to develop its full potency. Think of it like developing a photograph in a dark room. If you keep opening the door to show people the image before it's fully developed, you ruin the picture. The light gets in and destroys the process. Your life, your inner life especially, requires that same kind of protected darkness to develop properly. Constant exposure ruins the process completely. When you habitually share your life, you begin to experience your own existence as a kind of performance. You're no longer simply living. You're narrating, observing, preparing the story even as the experience is happening. This creates a split in consciousness that's absolutely devastating to genuine presence. You go for a walk in nature, but you're already composing how you'll describe the walk. You have a difficult conversation with someone you love, but part of you is already rehearsing how you'll explain it to your friends. You're never fully in the experience because you've trained yourself to constantly stand outside it. You're preparing the broadcast, editing the narrative, choosing which details to emphasize. This is a form of alienation so complete that you become a stranger to your own life. The reporter covering the event is never the person having the event. And here's what's particularly insidious about this pattern. The more you share, the more you need to share. It becomes addictive. You start to feel that an experience doesn't quite count unless you've told someone about it. Reality itself begins to feel insufficient without witnesses. You've created a dependency on external validation that leaves you perpetually empty, perpetually reaching outside yourself for a sense that your life is real and meaningful. This is the opposite of wisdom. Wisdom doesn't need an audience. Wisdom doesn't require validation. Wisdom is what happens in the quiet spaces when no one is watching, when you are simply present with what is, allowing experience to teach you without immediately converting everything into narrative, into something you can trade for attention and approval. The wise person knows that some things must remain unspoken to retain their power. Watch what happens when someone shares too much of themselves. Other people begin to feel they own pieces of that person. They know your history, your patterns, your weaknesses, your struggles. They've got you categorized, filed away in their mental database, and they start to treat